The Touch of the Master's Hand, Christ's Miracles for Today by Charles L. Allen. Chapter 19. Why does God wait to answer our prayers? God doesn't wait. The answer often includes something like no or later. The miracle of raising Lazarus from the dead. John chapter 11, verse 1 to 46. I get a new thrill every time I read the story of Jesus and Lazarus. It has love, pathos, drama, and builds up to a climax so grand that it includes both earth and heaven. It begins with Lazarus, who was sick. So many of the stories in the life of Christ begin with the needs of some person. In truth, that is where most of us begin with Christ. We have a need we cannot meet, and we then look to Him who is able to supply our every need. The two sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Him, saying, Lord, he whom thou lovest is sick. What a marvelous lesson in prayer. First, when trouble came, they wanted Christ to know about it, and through the centuries, as unnumbered multitudes of people have become frightened or burdened, they have instinctively reached through the darkness to feel for the hand of Christ. Somehow we know He will be concerned. My heart is stirred daily as I get letters from people I have never seen telling me their troubles. The only contact many of these have ever had with me is reading my articles in a big metropolitan newspaper, but their hearts have become burdened and they have no one to tell it to who really cared. I read those letters with a special prayer in my heart. Mary and Martha were also showing a marvelous faith. They had a great need. They told Christ about it. They felt that that was sufficient. They did not feel it necessary to tell Him what to do. They had faith to believe that He would do the right thing. In our prayers, we would do well to have as much faith. He whom thou lovest is sick. A short prayer, yet it contains all that is necessary. Now notice Christ's strange reaction to their prayer. As you read the Gospels, you are impressed with His eagerness to help those who came for His help. He was never too busy. No person was ever turned away. So, when the word came about Lazarus, you might expect to read how He hurried to Bethany, to the bedside of Lazarus, or better still, He might have just spoken the word, as He did on behalf of the centurion's servant, and healed Lazarus at the very moment. So, we are surprised to read He abode 2 days still in the same place where He was. I can picture those two ancient sisters. They kept walking to and fro from the bedside of their loved to the window. Why doesn't He come? They would wonder in anguish. Surely He will be here any moment now. One would say to comfort the other, but darkness came and He wasn't there. All through the night they watched and waited, but still He didn't come. Another day slowly dragged by, and still another night. Finally, Lazarus died, and still He hadn't come. That is the hardest part of prayer. If God says no, we can accept it. If He says yes, we are glad. But when God keeps saying, wait, we find that hardest to bear. Now, when it comes to that sort of thing, sometimes we're just not aware of what the answer is. Usually we're not aware. The answer within ourselves, maybe, but... And sometimes it does seem that God waits too long, but He doesn't. The old prophet was right when he said, if the vision tarry, wait for it will come, and it will not be late. Habakkuk 2:3. I know there's There's a Q in there, right? I know they right had the letter K. Yeah, even the Bible book names, figuring out what they are. Lazarus died, in the Greek and Aramaic. Why did Christ allow Lazarus to die? If we can answer that, maybe it will give us the answer to why God has allowed some of the pain, sorrow, and suffering that you have had to bear. Recently, I have been praying especially for a dear lady suffering day and night with arthritis. Why is God delaying the answer? Certainly Christ knew about Lazarus being sick. Also, he knew of the worry and anguish in the heart of Mary and Martha. Sometimes we think God is not aware of our sorrows and needs. We may doubt that he even hears our prayers, but Jesus assures us that God even notes the fall of one little sparrow. Jesus knew of the seriousness of Lazarus' condition, yet he did nothing about it. Why? It was not because he was unable to heal Lazarus. As you study his life, you see he was able to heal even lepers, to make the cripple walk, the deaf hear, and the blind see. Even the winds and waves obeyed his voice. We sometimes doubt God's ability to meet our particular situation. Thus we cease to pray and look to him. But God is always sufficient. With just one word, Christ could have saved Lazarus. Why didn't he do it? Sometimes we believe that our suffering is a sign that God is angry with us and wants to punish us. We may doubt his love for us, but such was not the case with Lazarus. The story begins with the love of Christ for him. He whom thou lovest is sick, they said, and it has seemed to me that some who have suffered the most have been those who loved God the most. Well, going through difficulty and suffering is not quite the same thing. Notice the story says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. He loved them not as a family, but one by one. We must remember that God's love is always an individual love. Jesus was constantly dealing with the one person. Some of his greatest utterances were to individuals. He healed one by one. We talk about the mass evangelism, but he talked about the shepherd going out after one sheep. He loved this one man who was sick. Then why did he let him die? I don't know. I just do not know. I say with St. Paul, for now we see through a glass darkly, but I also say with Paul, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as also I am known. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 12. So through a glass darkly, so very occult, or maybe he's confused, or, well, you know what I mean. Occult is like the popular use. We need to use some hermeneutics, right? If we knew all the answers, we would not need faith. Faith takes us up where sight leaves off. The Bible says, now faith is, words left out, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Faith pierces the darkness of our hearts and knows there is an answer, a reason, a good reason, and it accepts that fact and keeps moving toward God. Lazarus did die. Then we read, many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them. So many things on earth have changed. The clothes we wear, the food we eat, even the language we speak. But people are still the same. When a heart is broken, friends still come to sympathize, to comfort. And what a blessing it is to have someone to share our sorrows. Sometimes a friend who cares means more than anything else on earth. Martha still believed. When Jesus finally came to Bethany, where Lazarus had died, we read that Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. That is wonderful. While her brother was sick, she had sent word to Christ and had expected him to do something. Instead, he delayed coming until it seemed it was now too late. Death had beat him there, yet in spite of that, Martha was not bitter. She might have said, I refuse ever to speak to Christ again. He failed me when I asked for his help. But be it her everlasting glory, she didn't say that. Well, it could take days to reach places. Especially, she knew that Jesus was a hand laborer and had to deal with crowds and all that stuff. So, in my years as a minister, I've come to know people in almost every condition. Many will bring tears of sympathy to your eyes, but the most pitiful, helpless creature I have ever met is one who has allowed a sorrow to make him bitter. I am praying for a man now who said to me, God could have saved me from this. He didn't, and I will never darken the door of a church again. Well, often it's what people choose to do. And honestly, people need to stop it with this natural evil argument, like the forces of nature or the consequences of whatever that means on a micro or macro level, are the same thing as evil. Not only did Jesus fail to save Lazarus, he didn't even come to the funeral. He was their best friend. He could have come, but he didn't. Well, we're filling in blanks, aren't we? Their neighbors came. They sent flowers. They helped in every way they could. But Jesus didn't come. Still, Martha was so anxious to see him that she ran out to meet him. We love her for that spirit. Her first words to him were, If thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. People need to knock it off with ifs because sort of they don't know. Because there's other ifs they don't know about. If it was different, well, something else, right? Many times we feel that our troubles are a sign that God has forgotten us. Sometimes our troubles do come because God was not with us. Well, God's omnipresent. Many couples can say, Lord, if thou hadst been in our home, it would not have been broken. Many defeated, miserable people can say, Lord, if thou hadst been in my life, things would have been different. But in cases like that, the reason of his absence was because we refused to let him come in. God never forsakes us. We forsake him. Yeah, to say that, my God, why have you forsaken me, is a statement of disbelief. Now notice the complete faith of Martha. Even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Now, it's possible that what was really meant was, my God, why have you forgiven me? It is so easy to lose hope and throw up our hands in despair. But we need to know that with Christ, no person is hopeless. With Christ, there is a solution to every problem. With Christ, something can always be done. We only become hopeless when we refuse to believe. Now, there's reason to think that the crucifixion was a later part of the story, and there are people who believe in Jesus as Messiah that do not believe in the crucifixion either as something survived or literal and he died, or symbolic, or they just don't believe it happened. Historically, you can't actually make that argument. It could be said that Barabbas was killed, and he likely could have been crucified between the two zealots he stormed the temple, but he died. So, and there were messianic figures that were crucified. Well, I mean, claimants to the messianic thing, anyways. So it may not have been Jesus that was put into the story. I mean, Jesus the Messiah. Every Sunday night, I ask my congregation to sing the little chorus, only believe, all things are possible, only believe. God's power in our lives is limited only by our lack of belief. What is your situation? Remember the faith of Martha? Even when death had come, she still believed Christ could do something. We have a saying, where there is a life, there is a hope. Oh, there's something similar, something away. Where there's a will, there's a way. Yeah, that's it. But Martha goes even beyond that. She had hoped even in death. At least we do have life, and we should know that no matter what has happened, when we pray, it will bring results. Jesus said to her, "Thy brother shall rise again." To you, he will say, there is still life ahead. May we rise to that faith.